A billionaire's deaf twins were ignored, until a waitress used sign language. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's come back to our main character. The restaurant is expensive, the kind of place where a single entree costs more than some people's weekly groceries, all soft lighting and quiet confidence. The low hum of conversations mixing with the faint clink of silverware. And at the center of it all sits Daniel Wright, a billionaire known in business magazines as ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. But tonight, none of that matters, because across from him are his 6-year-old twins Noah and Lucas, sitting too straight in their chairs, hands folded tightly on the edge of the table, eyes darting around the room with a familiar mix of hope and resignation. They are deaf, born that way, and Daniel has learned the hard way that money cannot buy the one thing he wants most for them in moments like this: to be seen without explanation, to be treated as normal children instead of a problem to work around. A server passes by without stopping, another glances at the table and keeps walking, and Daniel notices the small things, the way Noah lifts his hand slightly to sign for water, the way Lucas mirrors him, careful, practiced, and how neither of them looks surprised when nothing happens. Daniel feels his jaw tighten, not with anger, but with something heavier, a quiet exhaustion that comes from watching your children learn too early that the world does not slow down for them. He could stand up, wave someone over, make it very clear who he is. He knows exactly how quickly attitudes change once people recognize his face, but he doesn't, because every time he does that, the lesson is the same: respect comes from power, not understanding, and he hates that lesson. He lowers his voice and signs to the boys, slow and calm, telling them to wait a moment longer, that he will handle it, even though he can already see the disappointment settling in their shoulders. That is when it happens. From the edge of his vision, a young waitress stops walking. She is not dressed like the others, her uniform a little worn, her shoes practical instead of polished, and for a brief second she just watches the table, not with curiosity, not with pity, but with recognition. She steps closer, kneels slightly so she is at eye level with the twins, and without saying a single word, her hands move. The sign is simple, gentle, unmistakable. Are you okay? Noah freezes, his eyes widening, and Lucas inhales sharply, the sound small but full of surprise, and then their hands move back, fast, excited, a rush of questions tumbling out in practiced gestures. Daniel's breath catches in his chest. He has seen specialists, therapists, teachers, people trained and paid to communicate with his sons, but this is different. This is effortless, natural, as if the world is suddenly tilted just enough to meet his children where they are. The waitress smiles, nodding as she understands them with ease, signing back that she will bring water, that she is sorry they had to wait, that they did nothing wrong. She does not look at Daniel for permission. She does not ask questions. She simply acts. When she finally glances up at him, her eyes hold no fear, no calculation, just a quiet certainty, the kind that does not need validation. Daniel feels something shift, something he has kept tightly controlled for years, and for the first time that night, the expensive restaurant fades away, the polished image, the unspoken hierarchy, all of it dissolves, leaving only this moment, a stranger kneeling beside his children, giving them back something he thought the world had already taken, their voice. And in that instant, a decision begins to form in Daniel's mind, not as a business move, not as charity, but as a necessity, because whatever this woman has, whatever allowed her to see his sons when everyone else walked past, it is something his family needs far more than another quiet dinner where they are ignored, and he does not yet know how far he is willing to go to make sure she never leaves their lives. The water arrives fast, not because anyone suddenly remembered their job, but because the waitress who knelt beside Noah and Lucas moves with purpose, weaving through the dining room like she owns her place in it. She sets down 2 tall glasses with lemon, then signs again, slow and clear, asking if they want more time to choose, asking if the music is too loud, asking if the lights hurt their eyes. The twins answer at once, their hands animated, their faces changing from guarded to alive, and Daniel watches the transformation with a tightness in his throat. He does not let reach his voice. He signs to them that they can order whatever they want, then he looks up at the waitress and finally speaks. "Thank you," he says, simple, restrained, as if anything more might break the moment. She nods, but she does not linger for praise. "Of course," she replies. "They were asking. I just listened." Her name tag says Leela. The letters are slightly worn, as if she has been here longer than the uniform suggests. Daniel repeats the name in his mind, Leela, and it lands with an unfamiliar weight because it is attached to a feeling he cannot buy, only recognize. A manager appears a second later, smiling too wide, already sweating at the sight of Daniel Wright sitting in his section. "Mr. Wright, welcome, welcome, we are honored," the manager says, voice syrupy, hands hovering like he wants to fix the entire evening with one apology. Daniel does not even glance at him. His eyes stay on his sons and on Leela. "My boys have been trying to order water for several minutes." Daniel says quietly, "It is not a shout. It is worse than a shout, because it is a statement of fact, the kind that cannot be argued with." The manager stammers, promises training, promises sensitivity, promises anything, and Daniel hears the familiar scramble of people who only care when power is present. Leela stands still beside the table, hands folded at her waist, gaze lowered, as if she expects to be blamed for stepping out of line. Daniel notices that too, and something in him hardens, not against her, but against the world that taught her to anticipate punishment for kindness. "She did exactly what your staff failed to do." Daniel adds, calm as glass, "Do not make this her problem." The manager blinks, then nods rapidly, backing away as if the air around Daniel has become dangerous. When the manager is gone, the dining room returns to its hum, but Daniel cannot. He watches Noah sign something to Leela, a shy question, and Leela answers with a soft smile, then signs back, "Yes, you can tell me again, I understand." Lucas leans in emboldened and signs a joke, and Leela laughs with her whole face, not politely, not carefully, but genuinely, and Daniel feels the strange ache of realizing how rare that is for his sons in public. He should leave a generous tip and walk away, like he always does. Let this be a brief, bright moment in a long series of disappointments. But a thought presses against him, insistent, practical, ruthless in the way his mind always is when it wants something. People like Leela do not stay in places like this. They get burned out. They get scolded. They get replaced by someone who does not care. And his sons cannot afford to lose another person who makes them feel visible. Daniel waits until Leela returns with their meals. Then he asks, "How do you know sign language?" He keeps his tone neutral, because he has learned that the wrong question can make people defensive. Leela hesitates, eyes flicking to the other tables, then back to the twins. "My mother was deaf," she says quietly. "I grew up signing before I could spell." There is something careful in her voice, as if that history is both pride and bruise. Daniel nods once. "Do you teach?" he asks. She shakes her head. "No, sir, I just work." Daniel studies her for a beat, then looks down at Noah and Lucas, who are watching him closely, as if they can sense the shift in his breathing. He signs to them, "I am going to ask her something. Is that okay?" Noah signs back fast, "Yes, please." Daniel turns to Leela and makes a decision that feels impossible and inevitable at the same time. "I want to hire you," he says. Leela stiffens. "Sir, I am not available for private events." She begins, misunderstanding, bracing for an offer that will make her feel small. Daniel shakes his head. "Not like that." He says firm, "I want you in my home, with my sons, as their communication aid, their advocate, someone who does not treat them like an inconvenience." Leela's eyes widen, and for a second she looks at the twins, as if to confirm she heard correctly. Then she swallows. That is a lot," she whispers. Daniel reaches into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulls out a sleek card case. He slides a simple white card across the table, no logo, no title, only a name and a direct number. "Call me tomorrow," he says. "If you say no, I will respect it. If you say yes, we will talk terms." Leela stares at the card like it might burn her fingers. She does not touch it yet. She looks at Daniel, then at Noah and Lucas, and her face softens in a way Daniel recognizes as the beginning of a choice. He thinks the moment is about employment, about help, about logistics, but he does not see the second layer forming beneath it, the truth that will pull them all into something far more complicated than a job. Because Daniel is not only offering work, he is offering access to a world that eats people alive, and he is doing it without realizing that the real problem in his life is not the restaurant staff who ignored his sons. It is the people waiting behind his wealth, ready to use his family as a weapon the moment he gives them an opening. The next morning, Leela wakes up before her alarm, the kind of early waking that comes from worry instead of rest. Her small apartment is quiet except for the rattling heater and the distant traffic, and for a moment she lies still, staring at the ceiling, replaying last night like a scene she does not trust herself to believe. Daniel Wright. The name alone feels unreal, the kind of name printed on skyscrapers and scholarship plaques, and yet she can still see his face when his son signed to her, the way his expression cracked for just a second, not with charm, but with relief. Leela sits up, rubs her eyes, and reaches for her phone. She almost does not call. People like him do not hand out cards unless they want something, and she has learned to be careful about what the world labels as opportunity. But then she remembers Noah's wide eyes, the way Lucas laughed with his whole face, and she thinks of her mother at their kitchen table years ago, hands moving patiently as she taught Leela that language is not just words, it is dignity. Leela exhales and presses call. The line connects on the second ring. Leela. Daniel says, as if he has been waiting, voice steady and controlled, but softer than a man like him is supposed to sound. Thank you for calling. She clears her throat. I do not know what you expect from me, she says carefully. I am a waitress. I am not licensed as an interpreter. I am not looking for charity. There is a pause, and in that pause she hears something that surprises her, not irritation, not impatience, but respect. I am not offering charity, Daniel replies. I am offering work, real work, with boundaries, with pay that matches what I am asking. Leela's grip tightens on the phone. What exactly are you asking? Daniel tells her the basics, that he wants someone consistent for Noah and Lucas, someone who can help them communicate in a hearing world without making them feel like they are begging for attention. He says he has staff, tutors, specialists, but none of it feels human, none of it feels like what happened at the restaurant. Leela listens, and the more he speaks, the more she realizes this is not a rich man trying to buy virtue. This is a father trying to buy time, trying to buy safety because he has no other tools. Still, her instincts hold the line. Why me? She asks, and her voice comes out sharper than she intends. Because you did not change when you saw who I was, Daniel answers. My sons noticed that. I noticed that. Leela swallows hard. That is the dangerous part. Being valued for what you are is intoxicating, but it is also how people get trapped. Daniel gives her an address and a time. My office. 10 a.m. We can talk. No pressure. Leela agrees before she can overthink it, and 2 hours later she stands outside a glass tower that seems to cut the sky, the kind of building where even the air feels expensive. She rides an elevator so quiet it feels like floating, and when the doors open, everything is polished stone and clean lines and employees who move like they are trained to never look uncertain. A receptionist recognizes her name before she says it. Ms. Reyes, Mr. Wright is expecting you. The words hit Leela in the chest, expecting you. She is led into a conference room with a long table and a view that stretches for miles, and Daniel is already there, not in a tuxedo like last night, but in a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, as if he has been working since dawn. On the table sits a slim folder. Leela's eyes go to it immediately. Contracts, paper terms, rules. Daniel gestures to the chair across from him. I asked my legal team to draft an agreement, he says, and he says it like a warning, not a trap. Not to control you, to protect you, to protect my sons, to protect my company. Everything in my world becomes a headline if we are not careful. Leela sits heart thudding and Daniel opens the folder. The first page is simple job title, salary, benefits, schedule. The numbers make her blink because they are more than she has ever made, enough to change her life overnight, and that is exactly why she does not trust it. Daniel watches her reaction. I know what you are thinking, he says quietly. You think I am trying to buy you. Leela forces herself to meet his eyes. Are you not? She asks. Daniel's expression tightens, then he shakes his head. I am trying to hire someone who treats my sons like people, he says. And yes, I am trying to keep you close, because the world keeps failing them, and I am tired of watching it happen. Leela looks down at the pages again, scanning the terms, and then she sees the section that makes her breath catch, confidentiality, public appearances, media clauses. It is not just a job. It is a doorway into a life where she will be watched, judged, dissected. Daniel speaks before she can ask. There is more, he says. In 3 weeks, I have a foundation gala. My board is already circling. They have been questioning my leadership, my stability, my ability to represent a family-centered brand. They want a story they can sell. They want an image that makes donors feel safe. Leela's stomach twists. And where do I fit into that? She asks, even though her instincts already know. Daniel's gaze holds steady. I need you there, he says. Not a staff in the background with me. With my sons, visible. Leela leans back slightly, suspicion sharpening. You want me to play a role, she says. Daniel does not deny it. He just nods once. A role, he admits. And I will not lie to you about that. Leela's pulse pounds in her ears as the truth starts to assemble itself, piece by piece, and the weight of it settles on her like a storm. This was never only about sign language. This was about a man with power who is being cornered by people with more power, and about 2 little boys who cannot hear the room closing in around them. Leela takes a slow breath, and she does not touch the pen yet, because she knows that the next thing she says will decide whether she stays a waitress with a brave heart or steps into a billionaire's world where kindness can become a weapon. And Daniel, watching her, already understands that he is not negotiating with someone desperate. He is negotiating with someone principled, which is exactly why his next move is going to shock her. Daniel reaches into the folder again, not to pressure her with more numbers, but to pull out a single-page clip behind the employment agreement. And when Leela sees the bold heading, her stomach drops before she even reads the first line. It is not a standard clause. It is not a media release. It is a personal contract, written in clean legal language that makes something intimate sound like a business merger. Daniel slides it toward her and says, carefully, before you assume the worst, I want you to read it. Then I want you to tell me no if you want to. Leela does not touch the paper right away. Her fingers hover and her voice comes out tight. What is this? Daniel holds her gaze. It is the simplest way to stop my board from turning my sons into a weakness, he says. And it is the only way I can keep you close enough to protect them without the headlines tearing you apart. Leela's eyes narrow. Protect me from what? She asks, and she already hates how her heart is beating faster because her instincts are warning her and her compassion is arguing back. Daniel exhales slowly, like a man choosing honesty over comfort. From the story they will write about you, he says. They will say you are paid to play translator. They will say you are chasing money. They will say you are manipulating my children, and if you are only an employee, you are disposable to them. They can remove you with a vote and call it risk management. Leela finally picks up the page, scanning the lines. The words are blunt in their own way: a public partnership, a mutual agreement to appear as a family unit at official events, a set length of time, strict boundaries, an exit clause, compensation, confidentiality, non-disclosure, and a section about the children that makes her throat tighten. The twins are not props. The twins cannot be used for marketing without written consent. The twins must have a consistent advocate present during all public engagements. Leela looks up sharply. You wrote that? She asks. Daniel nods once. I insisted on it, he says, because I will not sacrifice them to save myself. Leela's hands tremble slightly as she sets the paper down. This is not just a job, she says, voice low. This is you asking me to step into your life. Daniel does not flinch. Yes, he answers. And I am not pretending it is romantic. It is strategic. It is protection. And it is temporary. Leela lets out a humorless breath. Temporary, she repeats, as if the word is supposed to make this sane. Daniel's eyes soften for a fraction of a second. My board has a meeting in 48 hours, he says. They want to appoint an interim face for the foundation. Someone who looks clean and easy for donors. Someone who does not have complications. Leela hears the word complications and thinks of Noah and Lucas, two little boys who deserve better than being labeled a complication. Daniel continues, if I walk into that gala alone, they will use it as proof that I am unstable, too distracted, too cold. If I walk in with a partner, with my sons calm and confident, with communication handled naturally, it changes the entire conversation. Leela leans back, studying him. So you want me to pretend to be your girlfriend? She says. Daniel shakes his head once. Girlfriend is a headline waiting to become a scandal, he replies. They will dig into your past, your finances, your family. They will accuse you of trying to trap me. They will call you reckless. They will ask why I brought a waitress into my home. Leela's cheeks burn. The word waitress lands like a slap, even though he says it as a fact, not an insult. Daniel's voice stays steady. A wife ends the argument, he says. A wife makes you protected by the same shield they cannot easily pierce. It is harder to remove a spouse than an employee. Harder to silence a woman who has legal standing. They will still talk, but they will not be able to vote you out of my sons' lives. Leela stares at him, heart pounding, mind racing, and for a moment she cannot decide which part is more terrifying, the audacity of the proposal or the fact that it makes a cruel kind of sense. You are asking me to marry you, she says, each word careful, as if naming it makes it more dangerous. Daniel reaches into his suit pocket and pulls out something small, setting it on the table with a soft click. A plain band, simple, unmarked, not flashy, not designed to impress anyone. I am asking you to sign a contract. He corrects gently. And to wear that ring in public? Leela looks at the ring, then back at him. And in private? She asks, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's jaw tightens, as if he anticipated the question and refuses to lie. In private you will have your own space, he says. Your own boundaries. No intimacy. No expectations. The agreement is about appearance and protection, not ownership. Leela's eyes flick to the glass walls of the conference room, the skyline beyond, the world that feels miles away from her real life, the cramped apartment, the double shifts, the quiet grief of losing her mother and learning to survive without anyone catching her when she falls. She thinks of Noah signing please last night, not for dessert, not for a toy, but for understanding. She thinks of Lucas watching her hands like they were a doorway. Leela swallows, then pushes the ring slightly away from herself as if distance can slow time. If I even consider this, she says, I need my own terms. Daniel nods immediately. Good, he says, and there is something like relief in his eyes, not because he is winning, but because he is finally speaking to someone who will not let him bulldoze her with power. Leela lifts her chin. First, she says, voice steady now, your sons come before your image, always. Daniel does not hesitate. Agreed, he answers. Leela continues. Second, I will not be treated like a secret weapon. I will be treated like a person. Daniel's gaze holds. Agreed, he repeats. And as Leela looks at the plain ring again, she realizes the shock is not that a billionaire would propose a contract marriage. The shock is that he is asking her because she is the first person who ever made his children feel like they belonged, and whether she says yes or no, the choice will change all of their lives. The agreement is signed 2 days later, not with champagne or smiles, but with quiet focus, the kind that settles in when people understand the weight of what they are doing. Leela signs her name carefully, each letter deliberate, as if grounding herself in the choice, and Daniel countersigns without flourish, then closes the folder and sets it aside, as if the paper has already served its purpose. The ring follows, slipped onto Leela's finger with a gentle awkwardness that surprises them both, because there is no performance, no kneeling, no practice speech, only a brief moment where Daniel pauses, then releases her hand as if reminding himself of the boundaries they both demanded. The announcement comes that afternoon, controlled and minimal, a press note about Daniel Wright's private marriage and his renewed focus on family-centered leadership for the foundation. There are no photos yet, no interviews, just enough information to change the narrative. By evening, Leela is standing at the gates of Daniel's estate, a place that looks less like a home and more like a quiet fortress, and for the first time since her mother passed, she hesitates before crossing a threshold that promises safety and scrutiny in equal measure. Inside, the house is still, too still, until Noah and Lucas appear at the top of the stairs, eyes wide, hands already moving. They sign her name before she can speak, fast and excited, and Leela drops her bag and answers them without thinking, asking if they had a good day, asking if they want to show her their rooms, asking if they are hungry. And the boys talk over each other with their hands, pulling her forward like she has always been there. Daniel watches from a distance, leaning against the doorframe, something unfamiliar loosening in his chest as the house fills with motion and meaning. Over the next days, routines form quietly. Leela learns the layout of the home, the soft spots in the boys' schedules, the way Noah needs a pause before transitioning, the way Lucas calms when instructions are broken into small, visual steps. She labels drawers with clear symbols, adjusts lighting where glare distracts them, and teaches the staff simple signs not as a lesson, but as a courtesy, please, thank you, wait, help. Some learn eagerly, some resist. Daniel notices who does not try, and those people do not last. Publicly, the transformation begins with small appearances, a charity luncheon, a board briefing, a school visit. Leela stands beside Daniel, composed, not ornamental, signing for the boys when questions come too fast, stepping back when they answer for themselves, letting them be seen without being displayed. The press notices her calm before her clothes, her presence before her past, and Daniel notices something else, that when he reaches for a glass or adjusts his cuff, he checks her position first, not out of possession, but out of habit forming. At home, lines remain clear, separate rooms. Scheduled check-ins, conversations that end before they wander. Yet the distance between them changes shape. They speak late some nights in the kitchen, not about feelings, but about logistics, school policies, donor expectations, the quiet violence of people who smile while excluding. Leela challenges him without fear. Daniel listens without deflection. When a reporter corners Leela after an event and asks how it feels to marry into power, she answers evenly that she did not marry money. She married responsibility, and Daniel, watching from across the room, feels something close to pride, sharp and protective. The gala arrives faster than expected, the foundation's most visible night, the one Daniel's board has been waiting for. Leela is dressed simply, nothing loud, nothing fragile, her ring catching the light only when she moves her hands to sign for the boys. As they enter the ballroom, conversations pause, eyes assess, narratives adjust. A board member approaches, smile tight, words polished, congratulating Daniel on his stability, welcoming Leela with the faintest edge of condescension. Before Daniel can respond, Leela meets the man's gaze and signs to Noah and Lucas, asking if they want to greet him. The boys step forward confident, and the room recalibrates as people realize this is not a performance, it is a family functioning. Applause follows later, after a speech about inclusion and accountability, after donors nod and whisper approval, after the board sees numbers rise on screens and understands momentum when it hits them in the face. That night, back at the house, the boys fall asleep easily, spent and happy, and Leela stands at the bottom of the stairs listening to the quiet. Daniel joins her, leaving a careful distance. "You did well," he says, not as a compliment, but as an acknowledgement. Leela exhales, the tension finally easing from her shoulders. "They did well," she corrects. Daniel nods, and in that nod is an unspoken shift, because the world saw what he needed it to see. But what matters more is that his sons are thriving, and the woman beside him is no longer just fulfilling a role. She is becoming essential, and both of them are starting to understand that the most dangerous part of this arrangement is not the scrutiny or the contract, but the way something real is quietly taking root where it was never supposed to grow. The days after the gala do not slow down, they sharpen. The board's approval brings momentum, and momentum brings scrutiny. Daniel feels it first in meetings that stretch longer than planned, in smiles that linger a second too long, in questions framed as concern but edged with calculation. Leela feels it in the way staff members suddenly defer to her ring before her words, and she corrects them quietly every time, redirecting attention back to Noah and Lucas, because power that centers itself makes her uneasy. At home, however, something softer takes shape. The boys begin to wait for her in the mornings, backpacks ready, hands already moving with stories they want to share. Leela establishes a routine not because anyone asked her to, but because she understands that predictability is a form of safety. Breakfast at 7:30. School review at 8. A check-in before bed where each boy signs one good thing and one hard thing from the day. Daniel watches these rituals from the edges, pretending to read emails, pretending to give space, when in truth he is memorizing the way his house finally breathes. One evening, as rain taps steadily against the windows, Noah hesitates during the check-in, his hands slowing, his expression tightening. Leela notices immediately and waits, giving him time. When he finally signs, the words are small but heavy. A boy at school said his dad married a stranger for money. The room stills. Lucas looks down, shoulders hunched, and Daniel feels a familiar surge of anger, sharp and immediate, but before he can speak, Leela kneels in front of the boys and signs back, calm and firm. Sometimes people say things because they do not understand. That does not make them right. Noah signs again, eyes searching. "Are you really our family?" The question lands between them like a held breath. Daniel's instinct is to answer, to reassure, to claim, but he stops himself because this is not a promise he is allowed to make lightly. Leela glances at him for half a second, not for permission, but for honesty. Then she signs to the boys. Family is who shows up every day. Family listens. Family protects. The boys consider this, then nod, accepting it not as a slogan, but as a rule they can test. Later that night, after the boys are asleep, Daniel and Leela stand in the kitchen, the overhead lights low. The rain has turned the glass dark, reflective. "I should address the school," Daniel says, voice controlled. "Shut this down." Leela shakes her head gently. "You can," she says. "But if you do it with power, it teaches them that words only matter when money backs them up." Daniel looks at her conflicted. "Then what do you suggest?" Leela meets his gaze. "Let me talk to the teacher, with the boys present. Let them see adults handle it without turning it into a spectacle." Daniel hesitates, then nods, trusting her in a way that surprises him. The next morning, Leela sits in a small classroom chair that feels too low, Noah and Lucas beside her, hands folded. She explains calmly, clearly, what sign language means to the boys, what respect looks like, how family does not always match what people expect. The teacher listens. The conversation stays quiet. No headlines, no confrontation. When they leave, the Noah signs something that makes Leela smile despite herself. "You did not fight. You fixed it." Daniel watches from the hallway, something shifting again. Because leadership has always meant control to him, but here it looks like restraint. The shift does not go unnoticed. At the next board meeting, a senior member corners Daniel after the session, voice smooth. "She is very effective." The man says, eyes assessing. People respond to her. "You might consider keeping this arrangement longer than planned. It plays well." Daniel stiffens. "She is not a tool," he replies flat. The man smiles thinly. "Everything is a tool if it works," he says, then walks away. That night, Daniel tells Leela what was said, not to warn her, but to be transparent. Leela listens, expression unreadable. "This is the part I was afraid of," she says finally. One kindness becomes strategy. Daniel exhales. I will not let them use you, he says. Leela looks at him, searching his face. I need to know that, she says quietly. Because I can handle the attention, I can handle the role. But I cannot handle being reduced to leverage. Daniel nods, the weight of it settling on him. Then we will redraw the lines, he says. Together. The words hang there, heavier than either of them expects, because redraw the lines is not in the contract, and they both know it. Outside, the rain eases, and for the first time since this arrangement began, the danger is no longer external. It is internal, growing in the space between what they agreed to pretend and what they are starting to feel, and neither of them can say which is more risky, walking away when the contract ends or staying when it no longer protects them. The fallout does not come quietly, it comes with precision. It begins with a leak, timed carefully, released to a business outlet known for smiling takedowns disguised as analysis. The headline does not accuse directly, it implies. A source close to the Wright Foundation questions the authenticity of Daniel Wright's sudden marriage, suggesting the arrangement was orchestrated to manipulate donor sentiment and silence internal dissent. Photos from the gala appear alongside speculation, freeze frames of Leela signing mid-sentence, cropped to look theatrical, calculated. By morning, the story has spread, softened just enough to be believable, sharpened just enough to wound. Daniel reads it in his office, jaw set, pulse steady in the way it always is when he is preparing for battle. Leela hears about it from a staff member who avoids her eyes, from a notification that buzzes on her phone before she has finished breakfast with the boys. No notices first. He sees her pause, her shoulders tighten. He signs, "Are we in trouble?" Leela forces herself to breathe before answering. No, she signs back carefully. Not trouble. Just noise. Lucas watches her closely, then signs something that lands harder than any headline. They are talking about you like you are not here. The words sting because they are true. By noon, Daniel's board calls an emergency session. Leela is not invited. The exclusion is deliberate. Daniel tells her anyway, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, suit jacket still in his hand. They are going to ask me to clarify, he says. To distance the foundation from you. Leela nods slowly, already understanding the shape of what is coming. They will want you to say the marriage is strategic, she says. Daniel does not deny it. They will want me to say it is temporary, he adds. Silence stretches between them, heavy and fragile. And what do you want to say? Leela asks. Daniel looks at her, really looks at her, and for the first time since this began, he does not have an answer ready. The board meeting is cold, polite, ruthless. Words like fiduciary duty and brand integrity float across the table, dressed up as concern. One member slides a printed copy of the article toward Daniel. We need to get ahead of this, the man says. If the marriage is an arrangement, say so. If she is an employee, clarify that. We can protect the foundation, but only if you cooperate. Daniel folds his hands. And my sons, he asks, who protects them? The room shifts. Someone clears their throat. Your children are not the issue. Another member says, too quickly. Daniel leans forward. They are always the issue, he replies, because everything you are asking me to do teaches them that people are expendable. The chairwoman meets his gaze, eyes sharp. You are asking us to sacrifice credibility for sentiment, she says. Daniel shakes his head. I am asking you to recognize that credibility built on erasing people is already bankrupt, he says. The vote is postponed, but the message is clear. Outside the building, cameras wait. Daniel slips out through a side exit, fury contained, already calculating damage control, legal responses, counter-narratives. At home, Leela has made a different calculation. She sits at the dining table, the contract folder open in front of her, the ring heavy on her finger. She reads the exit clause again, the clean language that allows her to leave without penalty if the arrangement becomes detrimental. She thinks of the boys, of Noah's careful questions, of Lucas's quiet trust. She thinks of her mother, of the nights she taught her that dignity sometimes means walking away before you are pushed. When Daniel comes home late, she is waiting. They will come after you harder, she says before he can speak. If you defend me. Daniel sets his keys down slowly. I know, he says. Leela takes a breath. Then I will remove myself, she says. The words land like a blow. Daniel's head snaps up. No, he says immediately. That is exactly what they want. Leela shakes her head, tears threatening but not falling. They want control, she says. I will not give it to them by staying and being used as proof of manipulation. Daniel steps closer, stopping himself inches away, remembering the boundaries, the lines they drew. This is my fight, he says. You should not have to pay for it. Leela's voice is steady now, resolute. I am already paying, she says. So are the boys. She slides the ring off her finger and sets it on the table, the sound soft but final. I will not let them see me as the reason you are weak, she continues. I will not let my presence be the excuse they use to hurt your family. Daniel stares at the ring, then at her, chest tight, because he understands the truth in what she is saying and hates it. Upstairs, Noah stands at the railing unseen, watching the two adults who have become the anchors of his world stand on opposite sides of a decision he cannot hear but can feel. He signs something silently to himself, small hands trembling. Please do not go. Downstairs, neither Daniel nor Leela knows he is watching, and that is what makes the moment dangerous, because the arrangement that was meant to protect them is now tearing at its seams, and the next choice they make will decide whether this was ever just a contract, or something that has already grown too real to survive the rules they built around it. The house does not sleep that night. Even after Leela retreats to her room and Daniel remains downstairs, the air carries the weight of unfinished sentences and choices deferred too long. Before dawn, Daniel is already awake, standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee gone cold in his hands, staring at the ring on the table where Leela left it, a small circle of metal that now feels heavier than any contract he has ever signed. He replays the board meeting, the calculated leak, the way power dressed itself up as responsibility. And for the first time in years, the familiar instinct to outmaneuver everyone else does not rise fast enough to drown out something deeper, fear. Fear that he has already taught his sons the wrong lesson by hiding behind strategy. Upstairs, Noah sits on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, watching the hallway light flicker under his door. He does not hear arguments, but he recognizes patterns, the stillness that follows tension, the way adults move differently when something is about to break. He signs to Lucas in the dim light, slow and careful. She is leaving because of us. Lucas shakes his head, eyes wet, signing back with certainty that surprises even him. No, she stays because of us. The words hang between them like a promise neither of them has the authority to make. At breakfast, the silence is thick. Leela moves through the kitchen quietly, preparing food out of habit, not obligation, and Daniel watches her hands, memorizing the efficiency, the care. Noah finally breaks the quiet, signing to Leela with a seriousness that does not belong to a child his age. If you go, will it be forever? Leela freezes. The question slices through every justification she has rehearsed. She kneels in front of him, heart aching. I do not know yet, she signs honestly. But I love you. Lucas reaches out and grips her sleeve, small fingers tight. Do not let them win, he signs. Leela closes her eyes for a moment, steadying herself, because children always name the truth adults avoid. Later that morning, Daniel makes a call he has been postponing, not to his legal team, not to public relations, but to the chairwoman of the board. He requests an emergency address, not behind closed doors, but in the main conference hall, with the full board present, streamed to foundation partners. The request alone sends shockwaves. By noon, Leela receives a message from Daniel asking her to attend, not as his wife, not as his employee, but as herself. She almost refuses. She almost chooses safety. But then she looks at Noah and Lucas, sitting at the table practicing signs for their next presentation, confidence fragile but real, and she understands that leaving quietly will not protect them either. The conference hall is packed. Faces polite, guarded, expectant. Daniel steps to the podium without notes, without slides, without armor. He does not start with the leak or the marriage. He starts with his sons. He explains what it means to watch your children be erased in plain sight, to realize that inclusion without action is performance. Then he turns to the contract, holding it up, not defensively but transparently. He admits the marriage began as a strategy, as a shield, as a compromise he believed necessary to protect his family and his foundation. A murmur ripples through the room. Then he does something no one expects. He calls Leela forward. She stands beside him, heart-pounding, hands steady. Daniel addresses the room. This woman did not come into my life to save my image, he says. She came into my sons' lives because she saw them when no one else did. If that makes me vulnerable, then I accept that vulnerability. He looks directly at the board. If you believe compassion is a liability, then I am not the leader you want. The silence that follows is not empty. It is electric. Leela steps forward then, unplanned, uninvited, and signs to the audience while Daniel speaks aloud, bridging worlds as she always has. She explains that she never asked to be protected by a ring, only by integrity. She explains that families are not weaknesses to be managed, but responsibilities to be honored. Cameras capture her hands moving, clear and unapologetic, and for the first time, the story shifts not because of spin, but because of truth delivered without fear. When the meeting ends, there is no immediate applause, no tidy resolution, but something has changed. Donors hesitate. Board members exchange looks. Control has slipped. Outside, as they stand together in the sunlight, Daniel turns to Leela, voice low. I cannot ask you to stay, he says. Not after this. Leela looks at him, at the man who chose exposure over erasure, and something settles in her chest. You did not ask, she says. You stood. She reaches into her pocket and places the ring back on the table between them, not sliding it toward herself, not pushing it away. We will need a new agreement, she says softly. Daniel meets her gaze. No more contracts, he replies. Only choices. Upstairs that night, Noah signs something to Lucas before sleep claims them both, a small smile tugging at his lips. They fought back. And this time, he believes it. The weeks that follow feel quieter on the surface, but underneath, everything is rearranging. The article that tried to frame Daniel and Leela as a calculated performance loses oxygen as donors, partners, and even a few bold journalists begin asking a different question. If the marriage started a strategy, what does it say that the strategy was simply treating two deaf children like human beings? Daniel refuses the usual public relations games. He does not threaten lawsuits. He does not buy silence. Instead, he does something that shocks the board more than any headline ever could. He opens the foundation doors. He announces a new initiative that is not a photo opportunity, but a commitment with deadlines, budgets, and accountability. Free sign language access programs for public schools in the city, paid training for service staff and partner venues, and scholarships for deaf and hard of hearing students who have been told their future should be smaller. The board resists. Of course they do. Control is their religion. But Daniel no longer negotiates from fear. He calls votes into the light. He makes every objection a matter of record. Some members step down quietly. Others are removed when donors, empowered by transparency, stop funding comfort and start funding impact. In the middle of all of it, Leela stays not because a contract requires it, but because every morning Noah and Lucas are waiting, hands already moving, eyes bright with the kind of confidence that only grows when a child believes they belong. One afternoon, Daniel comes home early and finds Leela sitting on the living room floor with the boys, a deck of flashcards spread out, each card showing a sign on one side and a word on the other. And Noah is teaching Daniel the sign for listen, and Lucas is correcting him with serious authority, and Daniel lets them. He lets himself be taught. Later, when the boys run upstairs, laughing silently in the way they do, Daniel and Leela remain in the quiet, surrounded by the evidence of an ordinary life that once felt impossible in this house. Daniel reaches into a drawer and pulls out the old contract folder, the one that started everything. He places it on the table between them like a relic. Leela looks at it without flinching now. We never used it the way they said we did, she murmurs. Daniel nods. We used it to buy time, he says. And time became this. He gestures around the room, the labeled drawers, the softened corners, the home that now feels lived in. Leela's throat tightens, but she keeps her voice steady. Time becomes dangerous when people confuse it for truth, she says. Daniel meets her gaze. Then let us tell the truth, he replies. He opens the folder, removes the contract, and without ceremony he tears it cleanly down the center, one rip, then another. The sound is sharp, final, strangely relieving. Leela exhales as if she has been holding her breath since the restaurant. Daniel gathers the pieces, drops them into the trash, and closes the lid. No more papers, he says. No more shields. Leela studies him. And what are we without them? She asks quietly, not teasing, not fishing, simply asking the question that matters. Daniel steps closer, careful, giving her the space to choose. We are a man who finally learned to listen, he says, and a woman who refused to be reduced. Leela's eyes shine, but she does not look away. And the boys, she whispers. Daniel turns his head slightly toward the stairs. The boys are the reason I stopped hiding, he says, and the reason I want to stop pretending. Leela's breath catches. Daniel reaches into his pocket, and this time there is no plain band offered as a prop. There is a ring, still simple, but chosen with intention, not for cameras, not for board members, not for strategy. He does not kneel because he wants drama. He kneels because he is done standing above anyone. Lila Reyes. He says, voice rough with honesty, I asked you for a contract because I was afraid. I thought love was a weakness and family was a liability. You proved me wrong without ever trying to. Will you marry me for real, not to protect my image, but to build a home with me and my sons, one where nobody has to beg to be understood? Leela covers her mouth for a second, tears finally escaping, and then she lowers her hand and answers in the only way that has ever mattered in this story. She signs yes, slow and clear, then says it out loud too, because she wants the world to hear it in every language it has. Yes, she says. The next morning Noah and Lucas find them in the kitchen, and before either adult can speak, Noah points at Leela's hand, then signs with careful seriousness, are we safe? Leela kneels and signs back always. Daniel adds his hands, clumsy but trying, signing the same word with them, safe, and Lucas watches, then signs something that makes both adults laugh through tears. Good, now you both have to listen. Months later, at the Foundation's next gala, there is no secret, no spin, no stage perfection. Daniel walks in beside Lila, and Noah and Lucas walk between them, heads high. When the room quiets, it is not because of power, it is because of presence. Lila signs as Daniel speaks, and Daniel pauses to let her hands finish, honoring her voice as equal to his. And somewhere in that room, someone who once would have ignored two deaf children finally understands the point: true leadership and real love are not status. They are action, consistency, and the courage to choose people over image every single day.